Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. We got a special treat. We have with us our guest, Michael Wolf, starting strength coach from Wolf Strength. You know everything there is to know about teaching people how to get strong.
That's what I tell people.
Okay. So if you go to 4chan's fitness board, the first thing it says is read the sticky. And if you read the sticky, it tells you want to get started in getting it at the gym, do starting strength. And there's a big controversy online about whether starting strength is a troll. So I want you to tell me, A, is it a troll? And B, what is it and why does everyone swear by it?
It is absolutely not a troll.
That's what a troll would say.
Yeah, right. With an absolute deadpan face. Right?
Yes.
It is absolutely not a troll. I think most people don't actually read the book, which is written in painstaking detail to really give you like step by step, here is exactly how to do these lifts properly and here's why. And then here's how to, program, not for a long term, but your first couple months of doing it. But most people don't read the book. They Google starting strength on the internet. They find like a skeleton outline of the program. They do it not as it's written in the book, but kind of just like the very, very watered down, simplified version that they find online. They don't do it with the right form because they don't read the book. And then they don't get the actual end result from it. And they say, oh, this must be a troll. As opposed to actually doing it, doing the little bit of research first. Here's how to do it right. Here's how to do it correctly. And then everybody who does that gets a lot of benefit from it. So that may be why there's that thought out there.
But why is it so respected and sworn by?
I think there's two reasons. The simple one is really that the people who do it correctly every time get pretty significant results. And of course, those results will vary because people's physiology varies. Like, some people have the potential to go this far. Some people have the potential to go this far. So, results will vary depending on potential, but everybody gets, compared to where they started, a significant amount better who does it correctly. So that's the one reason people swear by it. The second reason is I think that Rip, who was the author of the Starting Strength book and really started the whole thing, and Mark Ripito, who still really runs the whole thing. Like he has a network of coaches, and some of us, like myself, are senior coaches who staff and lecture and work at his seminars. But there is a network of coaches that spread the method around. But Rip, who started the whole thing, was really the first person to write a readable, popular book for the masses, not some kind of academic treatise that 16 people read, that actually goes into biomechanics and applied physiology in a way that makes sense to normal people. So the book is not an easy read. It's not like you just kind of pick it up, flip through, look at a couple diagrams like that are on the side of the machine. It's more involved than that. But to quote one of the movies I like, it's not rocket surgery. A person of average intelligence, given a little bit of dedication, can grasp it. They might not get it exactly perfectly, but they'll grasp it fairly closely because it's communicated very clearly. So it's written in a way that a normal person can understand and apply. And then if you actually do apply it, you get significant results. So I think that's the reason why it's kind of achieved the level of fame and notoriety that it has.
If someone's been working out for a few years, is it too late for them to do starting strength?
Almost always not.
Because the name then is a misnomer.
Yeah, I think if you could go back in time and name it something else, maybe that would have been a smarter branding move. Although the company is really not into marketing and branding. It's probably the most successful company in history that does zero marketing and like doesn't have a brand expert. It's just all content. So it's almost successful in spite of that.
Where's the name come from then?
I think that Rip came up with the name as like, here's how everybody should get started.
Okay.
But getting started doesn't necessarily mean the first time you pick up a weight. That's the confusing part. It's like the first time you embark on like a serious strength training program. And the thing is, even people who have done that before, very often can come back to starting strength and get results. Not because there's any special magic about it, but it's that the idea is this. It's kind of the law of diminishing returns that apply to human physiology. And pretty much anything you do, right? If you want to think about like a baby going from learning its first word to getting a PhD in English, some kind of English degree. Like it'll get its first word, within 9 or 10 months. It'll learn to speak sentences, not that long afterwards. By the time it's 5 years old, it can be taught to read and write basic sentences. So within 5 years, you've gone from like a blabbering nothing to like you can read and write. It takes 20 more years or 25 more years to get a PhD. So like the further you're adapted in your facilities with the language, the more input it takes to get more adapted, to get more mastered. So I would say the same thing here. In your early stages, you are unadapted to strength. You're unadapted to training. So you can make pretty rapid gains. So if you haven't done it in an organized way, it's likely that a lot of those gains are still on the table, even if you've been lifting. That certainly applied to myself. I lifted for like 5 or 10 years. Let's see, let me think about it. Yeah, it was close to 10 years. But I hadn't done anything organized in this kind of way. And I went back and actually did the starting strength beginner program called the linear progression, the starting strength linear progression. And I got fairly significantly stronger from it. Not as big of a difference as it would have been if I've never done anything. I had squatted 385 before I ever did it. And I actually got to 440 for a set of 5 from 385 for 1 rep. So that's a pretty significant increase.
In how long a period of time?
I would say about 6 to 9 months. Okay. I did a meet in there that I kind of tapered down and then took a little time, light, and then ramped back up. So it was a little bit extended. I want to say it was about 9 months, if I remember right. But I made pretty significant gains. For most people, a linear progression with no interruptions is only about a 3 to 6 month process, typically. So it's not even that long. And there are people who train their way through it. Like if somebody comes to me the other thing is there's a lot of self-reported numbers that I've learned are not really valid. People say I squat X, I deadlift Y, and then you actually see their lifts and you're like, oh, you're 8 inches above parallel. Your deadlift is a Romanian deadlift or something like that. But for people who have legitimate numbers, if somebody comes to me squatting 500 and deadlifting 600, it's very unlikely that I'll actually put them on the starting strength program. But most people don't actually get to the point where they've outtrained it, and they can still run it and get some benefits, even if it's only for a month or two, instead of like the 4 or 5 months that most people do before moving on to something else. The other thing that needs some clarification sometimes is the program, starting strength. The program is not the entirety of starting strength, because the technique analysis, right? Here's the anatomy, here's the biomechanics, here's how that applies to the human body with a load on its back or in its hands. That technique analysis can apply to everybody, whether it's an advanced lifter, a novice lifter, an intermediate lifter. And sometimes, advanced lifters might make some small tweaks for their own body type and stuff like that. But generally speaking, the analysis of here's how to do the lifts is broad-based, and that can apply to everybody. The starting strength program, like the one that's 4chan says, do this when you start, that's like a 3 to 6 month program process, different than the technique you use, like how to do sets, reps, which exercises, which days, things like that. That's the 3 to 6 month thing that you could theoretically train your way past without doing it, but most people don't. Most being like 99%.
My friend Jackie wanted to start exercising. And our friend Matt, who does not at all have a crush on you, told her, as some of other friends told her to do starting strength. Mm-hmm. I thought this was a joke because my understanding is starting strength is very heavily focused on the deadlift as the basis of the program. And if you're going to do deadlifts, that's the best way to get a nice thick back, which is exactly what most women are not trying to get. So which of us is right?
It's actually squat based.
Okay.
I mean, it's everything based, but you actually squat most often and do the most squats. It's not, I mean, it's funny because some people actually say that it should have more deadlifting in it.
Okay.
So it's funny. So you do deadlift regularly, but squatting is the thing you do the most and the most often.
I mean, so do you think it's something that a woman should, is it work for women as well as men?
It in the same sense that each person has different potential, it absolutely does. It's work. We've done it with people in their 80s. We've done it with people in their teens, men, women.
Yeah, but
them.
The outlook is the kind of body you're going to get from starting strength.
Oh, okay. I see what you're asking.
Yeah, I mean, if someone is trying to get I hate using this word toned, isn't this the more that's going to get them that bulky look, or is this bro science?
Okay, so this is a really important point for clarification. The first thing is that one of the things that I really enjoyed about being a starting strength coach for the last 8 or 9 years, as opposed to kind of just being like a generic fitness person, personal trainer before, is that we have a specific message of what we do. And so people come to us for that. So we're not actually trying to cater to anybody who wants to look a certain way. There are people who do that. We're saying we can justify why strength is something that everybody should take seriously and work to be better on. Strength is a primary goal. Above and secondarily, you will look a certain way from that. So we talk about. You want me to go into the long
Yes.
pitch? Okay.
We have an hour.
All right. So most people actually throw around the word strength without ever even defining it. So when we talk about strength,
I think my definition of strength is the ability to have a child.
well,
If someone
you
can
would
have a child, there's nothing they can do.
You would fail the starting strength coach exam.
Okay, that's certainly true.
And
But you have passed it, so congratulations on your bundle of joy.
I haven't had a child.
Okay, that you know. Anyway, go ahead, please.
True. So strength, for our purposes, is the ability to produce force against an external resistance, right? I can push against this table. I can push my feet against the ground to propel myself forward. And then really, if you think about it, that's the basis of everything you do physically in the world, right? In order to walk, you produce force against the ground, and the reaction force is it propels you forward. To move anything, to lift anything, to pull anything. You produce force, which is what the movement you do that causes other things to move, right? Like if a car is moving, some force has been applied, in that case in the engine. If an asteroid is moving through space, at some point force has been applied to it. So we can produce force against external resistance. That's the basis for our interaction with our environment. It also is the single most important physical attribute. Like we usually break down physical or athletic attributes into 10 kind of different areas. Like strength is one of them. Strength, power, agility, speed, endurance, flexibility,
Intelligence, wisdom, charisma,
accuracy,
dexterity,
yes,
constitution.
Intelligence, wisdom. I don't think those made the list. High verbal IQ might be on the list.
Okay.
So there's 10 basic physical attributes. Strength is the only one that has a significant trickle-down effect to almost every one of the others. Many of the others are compartmentalized, or maybe like they have a small effect on one of the others. But strength, I actually wrote an article about this about 6 or 7 years ago that people can look into if they want a detailed breakdown. But we can break down in detail why strength has a significant impact on almost all of those, and the ones that doesn't have a significant impact on it still has a small beneficial effect. It's like a trickle-down effect. So we're trying to educate people, hey, strength is really important. It's the basis of athleticism. It's the basis for your interaction with your environment. You should think about getting at least reasonably strong first. You don't have to dedicate your life to strength. You don't have to become a power lifter or compete in the U.S. strength lifting meets or an Olympic weightlifter, but you can dedicate, 6 months to the pursuit of this without worrying about the other stuff because it's really important. It's not just something that you do for, I want to look good for the beach in 2 months, I'm going to lose some weight. It's like an important life thing for your whole life. So you should dedicate some time to improving that, regardless of your worries about how you're going to look at the beach or how you're going to look at that event. Like, make strength a priority, at least for a little while. And after that, you can decide you want to keep going with it, you want to maintain it, you want to do something else. But it's a pretty resilient adaptation. Like, once you get strong, in the absence of some kind of like catastrophic event, like you starve yourself for 3 months, you'll maintain most of it for a long time. It does degrade, but it degrades slowly. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say everybody should get stronger until they're reasonably strong. After that, some people get hooked and they'll choose to continue and other people won't. But everybody can at least get reasonably strong in like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. It's not that long. So we're saying men, women, old, young, everybody can use these principles to get strong.
I always tell people that you can become a competent writer. Everyone can. I think this is the parallel. You don't have to be Agatha Christie, although I don't know why I'm using that name. But everyone can get to a point where you're like, all right, this is certainly significantly improved from where you were, especially if you're starting from nothing. I mean, it's very easy to go from nothing to something
right.
It turns a percentage, it's an enormous percentage.
And that's the exact same thing we find with our programming. You can spend 3 or 6 months doing the linear progression, and we could take an average guy who's on his first day squats 95 pounds, and the end of 6 months, talking about an average guy, not like a special, genetic freak. An average guy, will end between 250 and 300 pounds, assuming he's like, 20 to 40, he doesn't have injuries, he's willing to gain a little weight.
Yeah, don't even joke about that.
I know in present company such a thing is.
Yeah. I want to take a second and tell you guys about our new sponsor, Wix.com, Wix.com. If I told you, if you don't like it, make your own Twitter, I would sound crazy. But if 5 years ago someone said, if you don't like it, make your own website, they would have sounded crazy too. And now you can, thanks to Wix. We did it ourselves. just go to letthatbeyourwelcome.com and you can see what we put together. Here's how it works. I saw it. I did it myself. It basically makes creating a website like making a PowerPoint. If you know how to use a PowerPoint, you'll know how to use Wix.com to create your website. You drag things, you drop them, you rearrange them. It's really simple to use. The result, as you can see for yourself at letthatbeyourwelcome.com, is very professional. You can have your subpages. It's really important, in my view, for everyone to have their own URL. So if someone's Googling you from Tinder or from LinkedIn, the first thing they see is your page with what you want them to see. If you go to letthatbeyourwelcome.com and you click the link at the bottom, you get 10% off any premium plan. But you know what? If you don't click the link, it's free to build your website with Wix. So just go to letthatbeyourwelcome.com and you can see what we put together. So since the squat is such an important lift, what is the most common mistake people make when they are squatting?
People don't get lifting shoes. They don't get proper lifting shoes. They squat in sneakers or some kind of running shoe, and it's squishy, and they can't keep their balance because those things are meant to absorb force. And in lifting, we're trying to produce force, and we want that force to transfer up through their body to the barbell. You don't want anything getting lost in their squishy shoes. So wearing some kind of lifting shoe that has got a hard sole, either flat or slightly raised heel, will do a lot better job for the squat.
So like, will a sneaker, is that okay?
A regular sneaker, I don't really recommend. There are sneakers out there that are made more for this, like Nike Metcon, CrossFit Nano, Noble. Some people Chuck Taylors. These aren't my favorite choice, but they're much better than a regular sneaker. Or you can get regular lifting shoes are pretty widely available now, like actual shoes made for lifting.
That's really the most common mistake for squatting?
Super common, yeah, because I've seen that fix issues in an instant.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's very interesting.
And by the way, with those hard-soled shoes, you need to make sure you're wearing your Heshy socks.
I agree. So one of the big arguments that I've kind of had with you, because you helped me with my deadlift and my squat, I have absolutely no interest in gaining strength. For me, it's just a vanity thing. And it's also a mental health thing. Because one of the things I always tell people is when you're like unemployed or things aren't going good in your life, if you go to the gym every day, or even for an hour, you can tell that voice in your head that's yelling at you, I objectively did something today, and I'm objectively a better person than I was yesterday. So in terms of mental health, I think working out is really something that people don't understand how good it is, because we all have to deal with things like anxiety or depression or things like that. And it's just enormously effective at and there must be a physiological reason for this also, right?
There probably is, although that's not something I'm there's probably some hormonal release thing that I don't know about, so I don't want to get into areas that I don't really know about. There probably is, though. We do have some articles up. I don't remember, they may be, because we have a couple different, startingstrength.com is kind of the main website, but we also have Barbell Logic is kind of run by some of the senior starting strength coaches and puts out content. And either one or both of those have some articles on people who have shared some important information and some personal stories on like people doing strength training and mental health that has had like a significant impact.
But one of the things you guys you're big on other than squats is deadlifts. This is what he's famous for. Rippetoe's famous for is like popularizing the deadlift. Is that not fair to say?
I think it's more the squat, really.
You don't think the squat?
You think he popularized? I mean, he's done so much and has such a big influence that maybe that's like what struck you. In my mind, it's more the squat, but
I have heard of squatting outside the context of Rippetoe. Deadlifting is not something that most people know what that is, right? And this is something that I think has become very known as this is the best lift you can do, and I think it's his partly reason that this has become that idea in people's heads.
Maybe my finger's not on the pulse.
Okay, but on the same time, the deadlift is also known as a notoriously lift that's going to get you injured. So is it as important as people think? And how do you do it to avoid injury?
It is as important as people think. So for the starting strength program picks the most fundamental exercises. Like as you advance in your lifting career, you'll do more assistance lifts that are like variations of the main exercises. You'll do accessory exercises that look different, things that you'll see more regular people in the gym doing. But when you're a beginner, you really just need to squat, deadlift, press, and bench press, and maybe do some pull-ups or chin-ups, for a few months, because those are going to give you the biggest bang for the buck in the beginning. So the deadlift is like one of those core fundamental ones. it is the lift that most people can lift the most weight in. And it may be the lift. People argue often, like squat or deadlift are usually the two that people argue about if you could only do one exercise for the rest of your life, which one would it be? And I don't know personally, but the deadlift is like one of those.
Why in terms of how much they enjoy doing it, or in terms of its efficacy?
Efficacy.
Okay. But the squat does the squat work upper body?
It really, so that's one of the arguments against the squat.
Yeah.
Is, it only works upper body very peripherally.
Yeah.
Whereas the deadlift, you get more traps and back and even some triceps and lats in there, even though it's primarily working the lower body, but
Deadlift is primarily lower body?
lower body and lower back are the primary things. And then like upper back and arms get some work in the deadlift. So that is one of the arguments in favor of the deadlift. It's heavier, typically. Most people deadlift more than they squat, and you get more upper body work. The squat, you get a stretch reflex, right? At the bottom, you rebound out of the bottom. And that's something that's really, the squat is the only way to kind of train that in a weighted, incrementally loadable way over a long period of time. And that's something you use for, running, jumping, that stretch reflex. So you could argue about that. I don't know what the answer is. They're both you can, in real world, you can do both. So everybody can and should do both. But the deadlift is one of those prime exercises. So how to do it safely. It gets a really bad rap. It's funny, the deadlift, the squat, and the press are our three favorite exercises.
Overhead press.
Press, right, referring to overhead. I've heard some people have confused that before. Is that true?
Do you want me to tell that story? You set me up on my own show. This is very sad. So you had done nationals, right?
Yeah.
And you had deadlifted what at nationals? What was it? Was it
701 pounds.
What color are we doing? What is this? What is this? I think this might be an avarice thing. Let's go to orange. Deadlift 700 pounds.
701.
701. Squat.
573, I think.
And that was after not having squatted for a while.
I hadn't squatted for almost 2 years because I do have really genetically predisposed to having a knee issue. It's not because of squatting or any of the sports I played as a kid. So I don't really squat on my train. Now I've actually started again at a lower frequency. But I hadn't trained my squat for about 20 months prior to that. And I squatted 573 that day.
So, I mean, how is it that a starting strength coach isn't doing squats?
It's embarrassing.
You're a fraud.
I know, right? Well,
fraud.
First I got to the point where my squat is right around 600. So I feel like, okay, you accomplished something, you show that you could do it. But it's a rare condition. It's rare to have it even in one knee, and I have it in both. I can live my normal life without needing, surgery. So I'm not going to get a major surgery on both knees because each one is like a long recovery. So to me, like the benefits of getting the surgery don't outweigh the costs.
Yeah,
because I can still live a normal life. I can walk up and down stairs. I can do most things. Just a couple of sports and regular heavy squatting. So, but I do feel a little bit like a fraud. That's the truth. I hate it. But I can still squat almost 600 pounds. So I can't really be called a fraud.
Don't give me this almost
I'm going to do 600 next time just for you.
Yeah, okay. Do it for yourself. Okay, so deadlift was what? 701. Squat 573. Mm-hmm. And then press was
315.
So you tell me this, and I really, really violently hate when someone has an accomplishment and people's reaction is to like needle at it and then like find something wrong with it. It's like, oh, I had this contest I entered and I came in second. It's like, oh, next time first. Fuck you. Like, this is a great thing. Like, celebrate your friend. So I was very confused because 315 on bench press, which when you say press, I was like, that doesn't sound like a lot. It doesn't sound comparable with these other numbers. And I see guys benching for reps way more than 315 at my gym all the time. And then someone had to tell me, oh, no. It's not bench when you're lying down. It's literally just lifting 300 pounds directly over your head. I'm like, oh, shit, that's fucking insane.
It's funny. It reminds me, there's I think an early season Seinfeld episode where Elaine and Jerry are trying to set George up with one of Elaine's friends. And she calls him stocky. So the girl gets mad because she's like, oh, he's fat. She's like, no, he's really strong. He can lift 100 pounds right up over his head. And I'm thinking, yeah, 315.
Well, no. And Matt Hughes had this challenge where you could probably do this. I'm sure you can. You take a 50-pound dumbbell and hold it straight up over your head for 10 seconds. I think that's his test for knowing if you're strong or not.
Okay, I could definitely do that. It's funny because my training has been so predisposed towards absolute strength because I've specialized in this. Most of the people I coach are regular people who aren't trying to become like competitive lifters. So I specialize in it. So whenever you specialize in something, especially if you're a normal guy, like I have pretty good genetics, but I'm not a genetic freak. I'm not like, at the far, far end of the spectrum for this.
There's different spectrums.
Well, yes, of this particular spectrum.
Yes.
I may be at the far end of some others. Because I've specialized in this, that means you lose some capacity in other things. So when I was younger, I played basketball, I played baseball, I played football, recreationally. Basketball was only when I was able to play competitively. Beyond elementary school. But anyway, I've lost some of the endurance that I used to have because I've specialized so much in strength. Usually when you start training strength, your endurance goes up if you're a normal person, for significantly and for quite a while. But if you eventually get to the far end of the curve and you're specializing in it, my endurance is still better than a sedentary person, significantly so. And I do some training for it. But anyway, I don't have as much endurance. But for 10 seconds, I could hold 50 pounds over my head easily. I could probably do it with over 100, I'm guessing.
It seems to me that there's a lot of I have a full-blown eating disorder and body dysmorphia, and that's fine, and I'm sure you do too to some extent.
And I've accepted that about you, which is why I don't harp on you about gaining weight.
Wait, you don't have body dysmorphia?
Do I? I don't think I do.
I mean, no one thinks that they do.
I'm reasonably self-aware. Maybe I do.
Well, I think at a certain point, it's just like if you're how much do you weigh? 280, right?
Right now, about 280, 285.
Right. If you were 260. Right, there would be absolutely pretty much no difference in terms of your life, but you did a lot of work to get from 260 to 280.
It's so funny that you say that because I actually weighed out at that nationals meet where you told that story about where you thought my press was unimpressive because you thought it was a bench press. I weighed that. We have weigh outs. We weigh after. Hold on.
I didn't think it was unimpressive. I didn't think it was in line. If someone's benching 315, they do have my respect. I just want to be clear. I'm not sitting here benching 40 pounds talking shit on people. No, I think it's important. Go ahead.
Okay. But so we do weight. Most meets do weigh-ins. We do weigh-outs because we want to actually have the weight of the person as they lifted.
Okay.
Which is a difference from powerlifting and Olympic lifting. In those sports, you can cut weight. So if you weigh 240, you can make the 220 weight class because you do a water cut,
right?
And then you rehydrate between the time that you weigh, and depending on the federation, it's usually either 2 hours or a day. So people can, big guys can cut 30 or 35 pounds or sometimes more.
Yeah, same thing with wrestling and the UFC.
If they have a day.
Yeah.
The ones who have 2 hours, it's going to be like 8 to 10 pound cut and stuff like that. But with us, there's no cutting weight. You're gonna, if you cut, you have to stay cut through the whole meet.
Right.
So you have to lift in that depleted state. So I weighed out at 291, which is heavier than I've ever been in my life. I spent most of the last 5 years around 275, give or take. And I'm like, this is too much. I'm not muscular enough for 291. So I'm actually on my way back down. I'm trying to get back down to about 265, 270 at what I will consider to be like a better body fat percentage.
I don't remember where I was.
But I'm happy that I gained the weight to get, the 315 press and a 701 deadlift.
Sure. But my point is, I don't understand I don't understand the idea. This is a big argument online, right? Lifting for functional strength versus lifting for vanity. Mm-hmm. And I'm 100% team vanity because I don't understand, why do you enjoy being, like, if you're deadlifting 550 over 701, where's the benefit?
Right. Practically speaking.
Or even impractically speaking. It's literally like playing a video game and numbers on a screen.
I know. Most people, I think, because a lot of people like, doctors, I've had doctors talk to my patients about, they'll just arbitrarily say, okay, well, I just, don't lift anything over 200 pounds. Like, they don't know that 200, right. 300, 400. Like, for most people, it's
just a round number, so coincidentally, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So when I tell people that I'm not like a top national caliber lifter, guys my size competing nationally will deadlift 800 pounds.
Michael Malice.
I'm like playing AA baseball and they're in the major leagues. But like, people don't know, like 700, 800, 600, it's all so far past what a normal person does that it's just meaningless numbers. So there are some things like
a normal person doesn't have a deadlift number, so they have no metric,
right? Or even somebody who actually goes to the gym and will occasionally do a deadlift because they see other people doing it. So 135, 185, So the reason I do it is just because once you get that far into it, it's like, well, I want to know that when I get to the age where the numbers start going down, no matter how much I try to make them keep going up, that I did everything I could to maximize my potential in this endeavor, because I've chosen this endeavor as my life's work. So I want to know, like, I don't want to get to whatever the age is. It's usually somewhere in your 40s, 45, 47. Some people continue to get stronger after that, but usually those are people who started lifting later. Usually it's between the late 30s and mid 40s, typically on average. When I get to that point, that no matter what I do, the weight is going down slowly, that I did everything I could to just maximize my potential in this endeavor. There are things like I'm always the guy. My people ask me to help them move. People ask,
why would you want to be that guy?
So I'm not saying that's a good thing.
That's a horrible
but
thing.
When it's your own stuff, like it's actually is very convenient to be able to. No, I don't need help. I could do this.
Do you know what's more convenient? Hiring people. That's real convenient, and then you don't have to.
For an actual like move, like I hired people to move when I moved to Texas, but. Just in terms of day-to-day life, there's heavy stuff that needs to be moved.
There's nothing you're moving that's 700 pounds or 800 pounds.
No, so here's the thing.
What pianos are in your house? I've been to your house. There's no piano. There's only 4 pianos.
We haven't been to my house in Texas.
That's true. There's a
Maybe
piano
I have
there?
A grand piano now.
Yeah.
No, so the thing is, if you can only deadlift 185, and you have to, and the thing about the deadlift, and this is where this initial question from, you were asking me how to deadlift safely, and we kind of got roundabout. So hopefully we'll get back to that. If you can only deadlift 185 and you have to move the 80-pound lawnmower in a compromised position with like a rotated and rounded back, it seems more likely that that's going to be so close to your maximum capacity that that's going to mess you up. If you can deadlift 365, there's a better chance that you'll be able to successfully move the 80-pound lawnmower in a compromised position. Because the thing with a deadlift is it's ergonomically created so that you can actually get yourself in a perfect position to lift the most weight, right? You can't lift as much in a lawnmower. Or think about those the strongman stones.
Yeah, of course.
I don't have the world record at the tip of my fingers, but I think it's like around 500 pounds, 550 is like the heaviest stone that's ever been lifted, right? The heaviest deadlifts that have been lifted is double that.
What's your point? I mean, like, how many stones are you lifting?
My point is, you lift the most you can with this object that allows you to lift it kind of ergonomically, correctly, and safely. That means when you lift all these odd objects around the house, in life, whatever stuff you're doing, it's now sub-maximal enough of a force production event, because remember, strength is production of force against external resistance. It's now significantly sub-maximal below your limit, below your red line, that you can do it safely without messing things up.
What's the heaviest thing you've lifted outside the gym in the last 6 months?
I don't know.
But
I don't keep track of these things.
But this is my point.
Probably the desk that I bought, because now in my place in Texas, I have enough room for a little home office space. So it's it weighs. It's pretty heavy. It's a real wood desk.
What's pretty heavy?
I don't know how much it weighs. I didn't weigh it.
Well, I mean, shouldn't you know? I wouldn't know how much something weighs by roughly lifting.
Because it's so long that it's like 6 feet long, so it's hard to gauge the weight. It's probably 200 pounds.
Okay, I mean but
it's huge. I couldn't have done that if I hadn't. I don't know if I had to lift 700 to do that, but if I had only had a 400-pound deadlift, that would have been significantly harder.
Okay, that's fair. Okay.
I'm not saying that's the reason I lift. Like, if you lift for these like once a year times where you have to move something heavy in your house, I think that's a silly reason to lift.
But that's my point, is that lifting for vanity versus lifting for strength. The strength, I'm trying to empathize, meaning understand another point of view. I can't wrap my head around it at all.
So let me put it this way. I think for most people living in first world countries,
sure,
the numbers I'm going to give are somewhat arbitrary, that pulled out of my ass, but relative. If a guy can deadlift somewhere in the mid 300s, guy can deadlift 300 to 350, squat 250 to 300, press 135, deadlift bench 200. That's probably strong enough for like 99% of your daily activity needs in a first world country.
Okay.
The reason I'm pushing past that is just because my personality type is I need to be pushing at something, and this is something I enjoy. It's something that I do that is like I voluntarily make myself do hard things because that I think is good for mental. It's good mental strength exercise. Some people in our organization call that voluntary hardship, and some people give us a hard time for that. They're like, "Oh, that's so stupid." I think
it's not
actually
stupid at all. Discipline is
it's a really important concept.
That's extremely useful as discipline. How could you argue against that?
Well, I think these are people who are looking for things to nitpick at. I think people think that we're aggrandizing strength training. We're not claiming that strength training is the only way that you can do that.
You said that to me verbatim. I'm kidding. Go ahead. Wait, what?
All right, you got me back for setting you up.
Go ahead. I want to take a second to tell you about our new sponsor, Bright Cellars. CELLAR, like a basement. If you go to brightsellars.com/welcome, you get $50 credit toward your first order of wine. Why should you use Bright Cellars? I'm not a wine person. As I've said many times, I hate wine culture. There's so many brands out there. They all seem annoying. So Bright Cellar did something very smart. It's founded by 2 MIT grads. Yeah, nerds. What they did is you take a quiz at brightsellers.com/welcome, and based on the results of this quiz and your taste preferences, they recommend the perfect wine for you. Each shipment of 4 bottles is curated to match your personal taste profile. So you're going to have stuff that no one's heard of, which I appreciate. If you go to brightsellers.com/welcome, take that little quiz. It's fun. Do you like this? Do you like these fruit, or do you like this instead? I took it. They sent the bottles. It was 3 whites, 1 red. Really interesting stuff, and they were all different from each other. So I don't know how they did it, because I'm not an MIT grad. So go to brightsellers.com/welcome. You get $50 off. What a great idea to help people pick out new types of wine. Now let's get back into it. So, since the squat is such an important lift, what is the most common mistake people make when they are squatting?
Putting the bar in the wrong place and looking in the wrong place. Now, it is true, some people argue with us about this, but for general strength purposes, there's specific reasons why you could do otherwise. General strength purposes, average person, if they can, we want them to do a low bar squat where the bar sits right below the spine of the scapula on the real deltoids, as opposed to on the traps. And then they're also taught to look up. So we have put the bar lower and have them look slightly down. In the vast majority of cases, they're going to get a better training impact from that type of squat, where they, instead of looking up at the ceiling, they look a little bit down and put the bar a little bit lower on their back and lean over more. Instead of they try to stay perfectly vertical upright. That's not how you squat. You actually squat by leaning over. You're supposed to lean over. And then you have to learn to do it correctly. This is all detailed in the book, but that is a more effective way to squat than this image people have in their head of like looking up and staying like ramrod straight as they go down.
And I was doing that correctly, correct?
Well, you actually, because of your shoulders, you can't put the bar down in a low bar squat. So you have to do a high bar squat with the bar up higher. And if you do a high bar squat, you are going to be more upright. You're going to have a more upright back angle, and you're probably going to look up a little more too, or at least look straight ahead as opposed to down. But if you can, most people can get to where they can put the bar lower. They're going to put the bar lower. They're going to lean over a little bit, and then they'll do what Rip calls hip drive. To get back up is utilization of more muscle mass, and allows you to use more weight if you can do that. And that has a bigger training impact. Strength training isn't the only way. You can train. You can do that by training for an Ironman. Of course, yeah. You can do that in mental disciplines. But the idea is there's things that you do that are difficult, that are challenging, that are not comfortable in any number of different ways that you voluntarily subject yourself to, because our lives are so comfortable now, right? Most people, how many people go through their life without ever doing anything hard, mentally, physically, intellectually? Like most people, right?
Not people I'm friends with.
Well,
I'm not trying to be snide, but it's in all seriousness.
Not your friends, because you're not going to be friends with those people, but people like you see out in the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them.
Most people,
of course,
right?
yeah.
I think most people. So especially
when it comes to even thinking. They're not interested in hard questions.
So these things have an effect on each other. You subject yourself to things that are hard voluntarily. When you're subjected to things that are hard involuntarily, you know how to deal with them. It doesn't break you down. So I choose strength training for that because I like it, because I'm good at it. It's my life's work, so it's kind of...
You can only bench 315. What are you talking about? You're a fraud.
You're not going to ask me how much I can actually bench?
How much can you actually bench?
So I can be narcissistic. I've done 475.
Okay.
I'm working on 500 this year is going to happen.
Okay.
And again, it's like for people who are really into lifting, they'll know like these are numbers that are, like I said, like double A. Like if you're playing like the Sunday beer league softball, you get a guy who plays double A baseball. You're like, wow, that guy is like the best I've ever seen. But then you see him playing against major league players and you're like, oh, he kind of sucks. So that's like me. These numbers they're very, very, very good for a normal person. Most normal people will never get anywhere close to that, but they're not like national level lifter numbers. But, relatively speaking, it's something I'm good at. It's something I enjoy. And it's something that, at least for the first significant amount of the pursuit, does have health benefits. Like trying to deadlift 700, or for me, once you've done 700, well, now what are you going to do? 725. That's not health, right? There's nothing healthy about that. But getting your deadlift from 135 to 315 or 365 or 405, that is significantly healthy. That will have a very positive impact on your health. So it's a journey that you start because it has these health benefits. And once you've kind of gotten to the point where you've achieved those, if it's something you like, you're going to continue it because you like it. You've shown to be reasonably good at it. And it fulfills that voluntary hardship thing where you're subjecting yourself to things that are hard on purpose as just a general discipline, an expression of those kind of values.
Something neither of us have to worry about, but I'm sure a lot of your clients do, is motivation and staying disciplined. What tips do you give them, and how do you encourage them to do that?
So it's funny because I think the thing I'm worst at is like the psychologist aspect of this. I'm much better at the technical aspects.
Spectrum.
Surprise to no one. For people who really aren't motivated, like at all, I think I'm useless.
Okay.
For people who are a little bit motivated, the best thing to do is probably to get a coach who you're accountable to in some way. Whether that's an online coach who is expecting to get a workout from you, whether it's in person who's expecting you to show up for an appointment, whether it's a workout partner who's expecting you to show up to do it together. Find something that will hold you accountable if you don't tend to hold yourself accountable. I think that's probably the best thing. In terms of people who are already kind of doing it regularly but just sometimes aren't motivated, I think the most important thing to remember is that usually you feel better once you go, like make yourself go to the gym, say, I'm going to go there, I'm going to do one set and I'm going to leave. And once you get there, you're probably going to end up doing the whole workout. Or I'm going to go there, I'm going to do one set and it's even going to be lighter than I planned. You'll probably end up going doing what you planned because once you get there, things start rolling.
Here's a couple of tips I have. One is if I go to the gym after having not wanted to go, I'll mentally tell myself at the end the truth, which is I'm glad I came. And then I remember telling myself that. So the next time I'm feeling the same way, I'll remember what I said to myself. Like I'll hear myself over my shoulder and be like, all right, you did the right thing by going last time, go this time.
Yeah.
The other thing,
like a positive feedback loop. So you have to go the first time, but
right.
then you can remember that.
The other thing is for me, I go every day because it's a lot easier to do something every day than to do things 3 days a week. Because if you're like toggling between back and forth, you tend to skip things. So I am the kind of person who would rather not have, in terms of, let's talk about diet, because I know that's not really your big thing, but this is something I think is very useful. If it's most men have regimens, women have diets, I always say. If it's something where you're having to work with willpower, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because everyone has a finite willpower, and then you run out of willpower, you fail, you punish yourself, you feel guilty or stupid, then you start giving up, and it really spirals out of control. Whereas if it's something that takes no thought or no willpower, and you could stick to it every day, that is something that you can easily, or somewhat easily, do consistently. And here's an example in terms of diet. If you just tell yourself, I have one rule that you'll just stick to no matter what, like I won't eat sugar. If you just have that one thing that you stick to, it's like just going from zero to something, the effects are going to be very, very high very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's true for most people. It's funny you said it echoed almost the exact same thing. That there's a pretty well-known strength coach named Dan John who he has a book I think called Never Let Go, and he talks in some of his pieces there about you have a can of free will.
Yeah,
it empties out, and you can only dedicate so much of it to certain things. And it's a very similar concept. So I think for most people, exactly what you described is right. Do something. Don't like push your limits on your can of free will, because then you'll have nothing left for anything else, and then you'll resent it. Most people making a small change, and then eventually, usually you can build on that small change by adding one more thing, until you have a host of good habits, which, like you said, is a regimen, not a diet, right? Because you're trying to, for the most part, create something sustainable. There is a certain personality type I've seen some people have. It's the minority for sure, who it's like they go all in, and if they don't go all in, they're not even going to bother. So it's sometimes you have to kind of work to identify who the person in front of you is, and it's hard if you just met them. It's like you're seeing them for one session, as I see a lot of people for one session to like get their technique down. It's kind of difficult to make that assessment right away. But if there are some people that's like, you tell them what to do, they're going to change everything, and they're going to stick with it because they've decided it's like a switch. Yeah. Most people, it's kind of like a ramp. There's, 10 or 20% of people, it's like a switch. So if it's a switch person, you've got to treat it a little differently. But I think what you said is probably true for 80 or 90% of people.
The other thing I think most people don't realize, they'll be self-conscious about going to the gym. They'll feel out of place. I have never been to a gym, and I'm hardly some pro or anything, but I go a lot, where anyone gives a shit about what you're doing. Like everyone is so focused. It's like the other example is I mentioned this in a book I co-authored, like eating alone in a restaurant. Most people are scared to do that. Next time you go to a restaurant, look around. I promise you will find one person eating alone at least, and you didn't even realize they were there. You know why? Because no one cares. And it's like, okay, they had a meeting, or it doesn't mean they're a loser. It just means they're eating by themselves. It's fine. No one is going to look down on you for doing lightweight. They're going to think you're awesome that you're at the gym.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to find fraction of douchebags who actually care. It's like 99.9% of people.
And those douchebags aren't going to be looking at the average person, the starter. They're going to be looking at other big guys and comparing themselves to them.
For the most part. And even then, there's just so few of them. Like most people are either not paying attention at all to what anyone else is doing or are like encouraging. They're like, oh, like somebody who doesn't look fit is coming to the gym and trying to change that.
Right.
That's great.
That's the goal. Yeah, like we're in the same place.
And most people think, oh, I was there once too. Or maybe I'm still there. A lot of people go to the gym. They're not fit yet. They're on their way there. Like most people are either supportive or just they're not noticing and don't care.
Oh, I noticed. They're pathetic.
The funny thing too that you say that is I've worked in gyms full time for like 15 years and I did part time in college before that. I've seen people do the stupidest, most brainless, idiotic things in the gym that had like all risk and no reward, and they didn't give a shit. They're just like, they're doing this stupid thing because they want to. They think it's like whatever you're gonna do and go in the gym and do as a person, as an absolute beginner, as somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, it's probably gonna be less stupid than what half the people already there are doing anyway.
Let's talk about something that's often associated with starting strength. Go mad.
Go mad.
Is that a real thing?
It is a real thing, but its application has been wildly exaggerated.
Okay, so what's go mad?
Go mad is an acronym. It stands for gallon of milk a day.
Okay.
And it was in the early days of starting strength, it was really kind of aimed.
Was this Ripeto's idea, go mad?
I don't think he didn't come up with it, but
Okay.
he popularized it.
Okay.
And he talked a lot about getting, a tall, skinny teenager come to the gym, want to get big and strong. And teenagers are especially known for not eating. Like their breakfast is like, a packet of Gushers and, a cheese sandwich for lunch, cream cheese sandwich for lunch and whatever their mom makes for dinner. So he's like, how are we going to get some protein and calories in these kids? Well, okay, I can't get you to be disciplined about food. You don't know how to make your own food. Just buy a gallon of whole milk and drink one every day. And they get, what does a gallon of whole milk have? 2,000 something calories.
Is it that much?
130 grams of protein. If it's whole milk with all the fat, yeah. And it is an application that can work. It doesn't always have to be a gallon, but a bunch of milk can help skinny people gain useful weight quickly. In America, obviously, we have a bigger problem with obesity than with underweight people. So, but if you have somebody who's, 6'1", 145 and comes in, well, they need to be 185 yesterday, and then they need to be 205 tomorrow. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but people are really, really skinny. They can use to gain a little bit of fat, and a blunt tool works well for that. It's just an easy, simple thing to follow. Kind of like you said, it's like, here's your one thing, as opposed to, oh, you're going to eat 217.4 grams of protein and 343 grams. It's like, this person's not going to do that. Drink a gallon of milk. It's okay if you gain a little extra fat. The problem is people took that as like, everybody should do it. And like the average person shouldn't do that. People who are already overweight certainly shouldn't do that. But even an average person shouldn't do that. And people took it as like everybody should do that. So then what happened? A bunch of people got fat and blamed it on starting strength or Ripeto.
Okay.
Right?
So yeah, if you're underweight.
So if you're very underweight and you're not interested in like counting your, weighing and measuring and counting your protein and just drink a gallon of whole milk. If you're 5'11", 135, and it's not permanent, right? This isn't like, oh, this is what you do for the rest of your life. We're like, this is what you're going to do for like 2 to 3 months while your squat is going up 15 pounds every week and your body is building tissue. This is going to support the building of that tissue. It's not going to be like, oh, you're going to drink a gallon of milk a day for life. It's, a temporary thing to get this 5'11", 135 guy to 5'11", 180 in 2 or 3 months.
Wait, so he could put on 50 pounds in 2 months?
Well, probably not 2 or 3 months. Let's say 4 to 6 months.
Okay.
And not all that's going to be muscle. Like, let's be clear. Some of that's going to be fat, but his body, he's got no muscle and his body fat is like 8%, right? So at the end of, let's say 5 months, he weighs 185 or 190. His body fat's 15%, 16%. Looks great, right? We're not trying to get their body fats up to 30%. So people take that as like a license to like eat whatever they want, drink whatever they want. And that's the mistake.
So since the squat is such an important lift, what is the most common mistake people make when they are squatting?
Man, people mess this up all the time. They squat wearing the wrong colors, and it's just unbelievable. You would think this would be intuitive and simple. You see somebody squatting and they're wearing orange, and like orange doesn't even rhyme with anything, right? So you can't squat wearing orange. Now, you think you're going to squat wearing black, right? What's black? Black is death, right? Black shrouds. Like, Do you want to die when you squat? Well, you should
Deadlift. Black's wearing do you wear black for deadlifts?
So when you deadlift, that's totally appropriate. So you go home and change in between. You come back to the gym and put in black for deadlifts because you got to die for the deadlifts. But for the squat, you don't wear black. And like fuchsia, why would you wear fuchsia when you squat? Does that give you an instant feeling of strength?
So what colors are optimal to wear when you're doing squats?
Oh, there's no good color. Every color is wrong.
Well, what's the least bad one? What do you wear?
Birthday suit.
What are some of the big misconceptions people have when they come to you, and let's knock them out of the park? I'm sure one of them is if you lift heavy weight, you get bulky, and if you lift low weight, high rep, you get toned, right?
Yeah, that's like the bodybuilding, that's a pretty big misconception. Generally speaking, like you have to work hard and consistent to actually get muscular, right? It's like people think like the instant they like look at a weight, they're gonna like get jacked. And I give people the analogy of like a car, right? Just because you drive and use a car doesn't mean that you're a NASCAR driver. Doesn't mean you're an Indy 500 driver. You use the car for your purposes. You're trying to get to the grocery store. You're trying to take your kids to school. You're trying to get to work faster. It's better than walking, right? It's better than riding a bike in most cases. So you're using weights for improving your life. You're not taking them to the level of the NASCAR driver. You're not going to look like me the instant you start lifting weights. Most people aren't going to look like me ever. Right. It's like I've done this, as my strength as my primary pursuit for years and years and years. So that's one big misconception. Another big misconception I would say is, well, let me think about it. It depends if we're talking about people who are coming already for strength or like general public people. General public people, I think it's what we were talking about before about safety. They think it's funny that the squat, the press, and the deadlift, like I was saying, our three favorite exercises everybody who does anything, like the highest injury rates come from soccer. So I'm not saying that nobody will ever get a little tweak, but like real injuries that really set you back, very, very rare. The bench press is actually the one that people actually is dangerous because like once or twice every year, you see some video on YouTube, somebody benching in their basement alone with the collars on and they get stuck and they can't get out and they're like desperately calling for help and it's scary. So bench press is actually the one you have to be most cognizant of safety. And there are ways to do it safely, but it's the one you have to be most cognizant of. But the thing is, people think it's not safe. Doctors, physical therapists, they tell you should never lift anything over your head, or maybe if you had a certain injury, you should never lift anything over your head. And I'm thinking, these are like these medical professionals that are, their knowledge is trickling down to the people, or their opinions are their uneducated opinions about this are trickling down to people, are telling people they can never get anything off of a top shelf. They can never put their luggage in the overhead compartment again the rest of their lives. Like that's ridiculous, right? So people think the press is going to destroy their shoulders, the squat is going to destroy their knees, things like that. That's a big misconception. And it's all Rip actually has an analogy. He says it's like you don't get to drive a car into a rock and then claim that driving is dangerous. You don't get to not know how to do the thing right and then have people not do the thing right and get hurt and say, oh, that thing is dangerous. If you analyze how the anatomy works, how the biomechanics work, and teach people to do it correctly, it's extremely low rates of injury.
One of my favorite deadlifting videos, I think my only deadlifting video that I know and like, is a guy who, as he pulls up and locks out, he throws up on himself. There's a nosebleed one also, so there's two. Have you ever had anything like that happen?
I have had my nosebleed while lifting a couple times. It was usually in New York in the winter when, like the heat pipes are on and the air inside is super dry. I was in my third rep. It was actually, I remember very clearly, it was early 2015. I was doing a set.
Picture it, New York, early 2015. Yeah.
Set the stage. I was deadlifting 535 for a set of 5. And on the third rep, I felt the flow start coming. And then I saw it start spattering the floor. I'm like, well, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to finish the set.
Fuck yeah.
And so I got blood all over the floor, but finished the set. There was another time where I started dabbling in handstand push-ups, which is people know most from CrossFit. But one of the things, so I when I was here, I was the head of the strength program at a gym that had a big CrossFit in it. It had a lot of things. It still has a lot of things in it. But the biggest program was a CrossFit program, and I was friendly with almost all the coaches. It wasn't like we didn't like each other. But what I always like to sometimes like go do CrossFit things to show like, hey, I could do this too, even though I weigh 100 pounds more than all of you and I specialize in strength. Like strength is actually a useful thing to do for CrossFit. So I started doing handstand push-ups and I went upside down like my nose.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I guess like whatever it was about the inversion, like brought the blood to my head. And so I remember that happened a couple times.
But are you mentally ill enough that you thought this was an accomplishment?
Doing a handstand push-up or
No,
the nosebleed?
the nosebleed.
I wasn't proud of it. I was like, well, I'm going to keep doing the set until the set is over. Then I'll take care of the nosebleed.
Yeah, but so
I don't consider that like an accomplishment. It's not like something I aim for, or like breaking blood vessels in my eyes. Some people, they like have that little, like the little, I forget what that's called, but they break the blood vessels in their eyes, or the ones that are close to the surface in their cheeks. They're like, oh, sweet. I'm not into that. If it happens, it happens, but it's not a goal of mine.
Well, I think it's kind of like there's these little moments where like you're like in like when you have DOMs, right? Do you not enjoy, like, explain to people what DOMs are.
So delayed onset muscle soreness is it usually is associated with doing something either more than you've done or differently than you've done recently in your workout. So if you're sedentary, you always get it your first workout or two. But if you've been working out, you do something different, you do a new movement, or you do a movement differently than you've been doing it before, or you do a lot more of it than you've been doing it before, you typically get sore. Delayed onset, it usually kicks in 1 or 2 days later, and it makes you real sore. So it's funny you mentioned that. One of the biggest things I try to do is get people who are focused on strength, whose their main goal is strength, to stop associating DOMs with progress. It's like it sometimes will happen, although it won't happen that badly after your first couple workouts. But like, if you didn't get sore, like, I don't care.
Yeah, I
focus on the weight. Did the weight on the bar go up? Last time it was 115. Now it's 120. That's good. I don't care if you're sore or not. And that doesn't resonate with you at all.
No, and I'll tell you why. My friend Corinne once made fun of me because being raised in a Russian household, I have the belief that if I'm caught in the rain, I'm going to catch cold, right? And I don't care what science you tell me, there's nothing that's going to knock this belief out of my head. It's just there. It's as night follows day. And with this, it's like, you can talk at me all you want, but for me, if I'm not, like, if I can go up the stairs after a leg workout, I feel like I haven't done a good leg workout.
That's the level I was operating on in my early 20s too.
Good. I'm youthful and not a fraud
who
teaches squats and can't actually do squats.
That actually would have been a good answer to your question about the misconceptions. That's probably the biggest misconception, is that now some people, we have a dichotomy that we talk a lot about between exercise and training. Exercise is something, physical activity that you do for the way it makes you feel right when you do it, or right after you do it, or the immediate effects. It's not necessarily a process. It's just I exercised and I felt good. Now, feeling good might be a relaxing yoga class for one person. It might be a impossible CrossFit workout that makes you throw up for another person. It might be an intense kind of old school bodybuilding workout that gives you DOMs for another person. So whatever the thing that you want to achieve is, it's something that you're doing to achieve during or immediately after, soon after the workout. That's exercise. Training is a process by which you identify a goal, a performance or a physiological goal, and set up a program with a series of workouts over time to achieve that goal. No individual one of those workouts is important necessarily in and of itself. It's important because it's a step in a building block to the goal. So what we're really peddling is really training. We call that training versus exercise. We're peddling training. So people who only want to exercise, we can still teach you technique. We'll say this is the right technique to do these movements. But in terms of programming, it's going to be totally different, because they're just going to do what they want to do to achieve the way they want to feel. When we tell people, so when you're ready to graduate to training, then you can come to us.
When you go to a starting strength seminar, what is it? How much is there to talk about? Like, what are you actually teaching them?
You would not believe how detailed it is. Okay. And there's even more to talk about. I mean, I think like we could do a whole week on it, because we have to kind of shorten, and sometimes just some topics we don't discuss. We don't discuss nutrition currently, for example. And other topics are just like, we have to give them the bird's eye view. But so Friday night, we spend about an hour talking about coaching, because most people come to the seminar to learn for their own lifts and their own edification. But you can also be evaluated as a coach to see if you can get the starting strength coach certification. The practical evaluation for that happens at the seminar. We actually judge your coaching.
Isn't that very, very hard to get past?
If you sign up for it, you don't have to sign up to be judged. But if you do, it is very hard to pass. I think it's about a 10 to 20% passing rate.
That's amazing.
So the standard is very high. We want to make sure that people who have that credential really know what they're doing. RIP is very into that. It's like somebody has the name of his company, that certification. It's because they really earned it, not just, you don't just pay your money and get it. So we talk for an hour about coaching. Since even people who don't opt in to be evaluated as a coach will have somebody to coach on each lift, because we find it's like when when one teaches, two learn. You'll learn about the lift by coaching it, but we're not evaluating you unless you opt in. But we talk for an hour about coaching. We cover that topic. We talk for about 2 hours about physiology and then the kind of that exercise versus training dichotomy. Then we talk for about an hour about physics, very basic, like Newtonian mechanic physics. That's really the operating in barbell training. Obviously, we're not dealing with any like subatomic or galaxy level particles here. So Saturday morning, we apply those concepts for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours to the squat specifically. And then we actually go squat in our groups for 2 or 3 hours. Take a break for lunch. We have about a 2 or 3 hour lecture on the deadlift, which includes a lot of mechanics, pulling mechanics, and a lot of video analysis. We analyze lots of deadlifts and lots of, people don't know this also, some Olympic lifts, how the pulling mechanics apply both to heavy lifts done slowly as well as heavy but much lighter lifts done quickly. And then we go apply the pulling mechanics for about an hour and a half in actual deadlift. Then we have about a 10-minute lecture on the bench press because that's about all it takes. 10 or 20-minute lecture on the bench press, and then we bench press for an hour. So that's Saturday. That's 8 to 8. So 5 to 9 Friday, 8 to 8 Saturday. And then Sunday, essentially, we do the same thing with the power clean and the press, the overhead press, where we have a short kind of lecture platform practical session, and then we do the lift for about 2 hours in the power clean and about an hour in the press.
I'm shocked that you guys don't focus more on nutrition, though. I think, isn't that very, very key to gaining strength and looking good?
It is, and it definitely is something that it's like, what are we going to cut out to cover nutrition?
Right.
Like, it's like, I also want it to be in there. What I didn't mention is then after lunch on Sunday, we come back and talk about programming for about 2 hours, because that's important. And then there's another, depending how much time is left, because we try to finish at 7 Sunday, 1 or 2 hours for a Q&A where people, can ask whatever questions they want to rip. So theoretically, you could say we could cut out the Q&A to put in nutrition, but people come to the seminar, they pay, is about $900. They often travel at every seminar, we usually get like 2 to 4 international travelers. People travel from wherever they live to come to the seminar. They want to get their chance to ask Rip a question or two. So it's like, what are we going to cut out to put in nutrition? So it's like, I see like we need to have nutrition in there. And we do have nutrition experts. We have on the startingstrength.com forums, Robert Santana, who is expert in nutrition, answers people's questions for free. But in terms of the seminar material, it's like we should have that in there. But like, what are we going to cut out to put it in there? We can't start the seminar at 2 p.m. on Friday. Like, then nobody will be able to do that. So it's like, that's a good question. I think we all kind of know that it should be in there, but we also don't know what to cut out to put it in there.
Mark Ripito is quite a character.
He is.
And he's got a reputation for it. What is he like in real life, and what's it like working for him?
It's funny because a lot of people, like, they have their persona and then they have them. His persona that he's known for, it's just a smidge exaggerated version of the real him. Like, that's what he's like. The real difference between all the real difference is that he's actually, deep down, he's really a really generous person. That doesn't always come out in the persona because, sometimes he's specifically being curmudgeonly about something or taking a hard line on something because he knows he needs to get the message out. He's really a very generous person when you get to know him. He's done things behind the scenes that nobody knows about for people that might, that nobody knows about that are incredibly generous. But he's real Texan, born and raised in Wichita Falls, Texas, lived there his whole life. He's Texas. He has an incredible ability to kind of stand up for his position against, regardless of how many people are telling him it's wrong and stupid. If he feels he can articulate why it's correct, he will stand up against a 200-mile-an-hour gale force wind of criticism. He is incredibly articulate too. He says this a lot. He's like, people think I'm a genius. I'm not a genius. I just communicate incredibly well. And he's smart. He's obviously very smart, but he has an incredible gift of communication. And that's probably the thing I've learned from him the most. The way to think about training was important too. Kind of a conceptual framework for thinking about how to do the lifts and training. But communication, making me a more effective communicator as a coach, is just something that he's just naturally brilliant at, and he's worked to be even better at. He's just an excellent communicator. He's just libertarian as hell, real, Texas independent, has that spirit about him. And he's funny. He knows how to play up to a crowd. He knows how to use his sense of humor. He he speaks very extemporaneously. So he doesn't have a memorization of any of his lectures. He knows the material so well in his head that a joke that pops into his head at that moment, he knows how to weave it in. So he's incredibly good at playing to a crowd and kind of using his sense of humor to make that a part of his show.
In the same way that like a vegan restaurant and a steakhouse can be considered opposite, what would you say is the opposite training technique out there to starting strength? Who are your enemies?
Who are enemies? That's actually an interesting question, because sometimes your enemies are actually the people that are like kind of close to you,
Okay.
but just so in terms of when you say enemies, you don't mean people we don't like. You just mean like
Opposite philosophy.
approaches.
Yeah.
I would, broadly speaking, I would probably say the running community.
Okay.
And it's not because we don't think anybody should ever run. I mean, we don't think it's necessary for health, but if it's something you enjoy doing, like there's nothing wrong with being somebody who is a marathon runner and pursues that. There's nothing wrong with it per se, but it's like one is building tissue, one is breaking down tissue. So at some point, if you want to take strength very serious, like if you want to get a little stronger for your running, you can come to us. If you want to like run as your full-time thing, it's like you're constantly breaking down tissue. So that's kind of the opposite. We're trying to build up tissue.
So yeah, does cardio kill gains? Is that true?
It's not as simple as that. I think, what most people are going to do as cardio is probably, if they 30 minutes on an elliptical 3 times a week is not that demanding, but like the more demanding it is, the more of a divergent physiological adaptation is going to occur. That being said, that's still oversimplified, because we tell people not to do any cardio or conditioning during their novice phase, but that's, like I said, only 3 to 6 months. Most people, including myself, who get past that once or twice a week. I'm currently doing it 3 times a week because I am on a little bit of a cut, going down from 290 to 265 or 270. But most people will do once or twice a week some kind of conditioning. We like to do short bursts, like intervals, because we find that less eats into the gains.
So who are the people you guys hate then, if it's not the running people?
Oh, that you don't want me to talk about who we hate.
That's why I asked the question.
There are people in the lifting community. I'm not going to name any names. There are people in the lifting community who really, I think it's personality based.
Okay.
I think they didn't like the way Rip expressed things, and like a lot of things like that turned into them finding any reason to attack starting strength, to attack the whole organization, because at first there wasn't a whole organization. It was just like Rip and a couple of his partners, and now there's a whole network, but it's kind of by proxy. We're all sometimes attacked because somebody doesn't like him. So they're looking for any reason to attack because of a personal or stylistic issue that they had with Rip. There are some people in the lifting community out there like that. But I don't think anything isn't so bad to the point that like people are literally at each other's throats, but there's some, bile that's tossed between different camps sometimes. I try to avoid it.
Michael, we're running out of time. So I have to ask you, what was your favorite part of the interview?
My favorite part of the interview. It's when I got to say how much I deadlifted, 701 pounds.
You are welcome.